everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Welcome back to CBSN. Tonight, President Biden will address the nation and Congress to mark his first 100 days in office. A key component of his speech will be to unveil his American Families Plan. The $1.8 trillion proposal will expand access to social programs for millions of Americans, including child care and paid family leave. It will also push for tuition-free community college and pre-kindergarten, as well as provide tax credits to help fight child poverty. The president will suggest paying for his initiatives by raising the capital gains tax on Americans earning more than $1 million a year. A capital gains tax is a tax on the sale of large assets like stocks, real estate, and investments. The capital gains tax rate will increase from 20%, where it is currently, to 39.6%, again, for just the wealthiest Americans making over $1 million a year. The plan will also boost IRS funding to enforce tax compliance for high earners. I want to bring in Joel Payne and Matt Gorman now. Joel is a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. Matt is a former campaign aide to Mitt Romney and Jeb Bush and a Republican strategist. Welcome to both of you. So excited to have you here to discuss this plan. Joel, let's start with you. President Biden is most popular when talking about the coronavirus. Our CBS News polling finds nearly half of Republicans join 92% of Democrats in supporting the president's vaccine distribution plan. So, Joel, why do you think the president tonight will instead be making the pivot to talking about the American Families Plan instead of sort of resting on his coronavirus laurels, as it were?
Well, look, this is a big national audience for the president to make the case for this big next piece of his domestic policy agenda. And I think it totally makes sense. I do think that there will be plenty of, political victory lap, if you will, around coronavirus, because it's been a big success for the Biden White House. It's been a big success when you look at vaccine confidence. That poll showed it. I've seen other polls that have shown nearly a 40-point jump in confidence and public confidence across the board in the government's handling of vaccine distribution just in the time the president has been in office. I think they have set very digestible goals, and I think they are reaping the benefits of it. But I think a lot of the space tonight will be focusing on getting the country focused on the idea of infrastructure, getting the country focused on what the president's belief is in infrastructure and in the many components of this infrastructure plan. So this is a prime time opportunity with a prime time audience, and I think the president's going to take advantage of it.
All right, Matt, I want to get the Republican take. As you know, many of the president's economic-based proposals have been popular among a majority of Americans, according to a lot of the polling. More than 75% of Americans back several key infrastructure components, like repairing roads and bridges, and improving broadband is included in that. So our polling also found 7 in 10 Americans support raising taxes on people who earn more than $400,000 a year, which is something that Republicans have been opposing because, of course, it would roll back some of former President Trump's 2017 tax cuts. So, Matt, are congressional Republicans taking the risk of being sort of on the wrong side of history here by not backing some of these popular economic measures?
Well, I would say we actually are backing some of these popular economic measures. A senator from West Virginia, Shelley Moore Capito, even though the other senator, Joe Manchin, from that state gets a lot of the press, she, along with others in the Republican Senate, put forward a pretty serious proposal focusing on those very tenets, right? Roads, bridges, rural broadband is something that Republicans across the country, including a couple people I work for, including Steve Stivers of Ohio, have worked for a decade. So again, these are broadly popular proposals where you get into the thicket, and where Republicans, I feel, would be a total non-starter would be when you get into some of these proposals that really aren't infrastructure. Really only 25% of this package that he's proposing tonight is actual roads and bridges and the like. When you get into climate change and retrofitting, those sorts of things that will raise costs for the American people, no, we're absolutely not going to support that. But also when it comes to higher taxes, a lot of those people filing as an individual earner over $400,000 are small businesses. Those are the folks that have been decimated by the coronavirus, have seen their shops shuttered or restrictions really cut into their margins. So I don't think that's in any way going to be palatable once we get into that debate.
How do you explain then these super high polling numbers? Because we have them, on the screen while you're talking, and it just seems like over 70% of Americans, at least according to these polls, approve of taxing people who make over $400,000 a year. Presumably they are some of those small business owners that you're talking about. So how do you explain some of these polling numbers?
Again, I think many people don't understand that it would actually affect them. And also what I've seen among some internal Republican polling is that when you go with suburban districts, a lot of them recognize that those costs would be passed on to them. But again, I think this is the debate we're going to have. And also, Democrats have for years talked about how companies like to move their headquarters or jobs overseas, raising the corporate tax rate. Even Democrats don't want to raise as high as Joe Biden does, including Joe Manchin and others, recognize that raising the corporate tax rate to close to 40%, where it was during the Obama years, would really move jobs offshore. You look at a place like Ireland, who has really low corporate tax rates. They've seen a multitude of jobs from America go. So I think you're going to have that debate, and those numbers will tick down by quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. I would love to spend the whole hour just talking about, the economic plan, but we got a lot of other issues to cover. So, Joel, I want to pivot to immigration. The president's communications director, Kate Bedingfield, told our White House team that Mr. Biden will also discuss his immigration bill, specifically Dreamers and temporary protected status. Now, as you know, this is one area where the president is not getting high marks. Our polling finds 57% of Americans do not approve of how the president is handling immigration. So, Joel, what does the president need to do tonight to sell his vision of an immigration proposal, which hasn't really been clarified yet?
Well, first, I will remind people, immigration is a difficult, thorny issue for anybody in any party. As I like to say somewhat glibly, you can look at the political graveyard, and it is littered with a lot of folks who have had high hopes about immigration who have not been able to act on it. And it's because of a lot of factors. Some of them spawn from both sides of the political debate. Some of it spawns from the fact that it's a really complicated issue. It combines our the country's business needs with the moralities of our immigration system. So it's a really tough issue to deal with. I think the president is making the right moves, broadly speaking. I think the way they stepped in and they handled the issue related to the crossings at the southern border a few weeks ago, I think they were decisive. I know that was a tough moment for them, but I think the president and his team trudged through that. But I don't know if there's winning on immigration. I think the way we typically think about wins and losses in the political sense, I don't know if there's winning on immigration. So I do think the president is going to spend some time talking about it because he understands it's an issue that's on the mind of the American people. But I think the president would probably advise folks to adjust their expectations when it comes to immigration in terms of timing and also in terms of just the efficacy of the types of solutions we can come up with. It takes a lot of different factors, and it's not just the person who's occupying the White House.
And Matt, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott will, of course, deliver the Republican response to President Biden's address tonight. What would you like to hear from him?
Well, Tim Scott is a really impressive senator, and he has a really good combination of both. He has a great backstory, how he came up and became a United States senator, but also he's somebody who puts in the work. He did a lot with the tax reform, including working with Cory Booker to create opportunity zones to revitalize some low-income neighborhoods. And he's also working with Democrats like Karen Bass and others on police reform, a very serious bipartisan proposal. So I think a combination of talking about how he got to where he is, the opportunities that he worked for and earned, but also what are some of those things, as I mentioned before, that we could possibly work together with the Biden administration and get done, but also outline what our red lines would be, and whether that's raising taxes or some of the immigration policies that we believe have encouraged the crisis at the border. I think really bridging the gap where we can work together, what we believe, but also talking about himself. Again, his very impressive story are the three things I hope to hear from.
All right. Well, Matt Gorman and Joel Payne, thanks to both of you for joining us. Always a pleasure.